Joined by Craig Button and Bruce Boudreau. Bruce, you were part of the broadcast team covering last night's Leafs game. You've seen them play a lot down the stretch. You know they're going to get a tough opponent in the opening round of this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. As a former coach in the NHL, from what you've seen, do you think they're ready to step into the playoffs right now?
Well, I think if they were to step in now, they would be ready. And one of the reasons is the way they can bounce back. But I think the way they're playing right now is the way they have to play if they want to win a playoff round. They got to be physical. They got to play better defensively. They don't want to get into that run and gun game. Last night was a perfect example. They don't want to get into that game. They play well enough to get the lead, and when they get the lead, they're a tough team because teams then chase the game, and that's when the Leafs are really good. But I think playing really strong defensively and physical in their own zone, that's what they're doing when they play well. I think they can get it done anytime they want when they play that way in a series, especially if it's a 7-game series against any team. I think they'll be able to do that.
Craig, we know how important the Leafs' core 4 or 5 are going to be going to the playoffs. They've got to deliver. They're in trouble if they don't. But beyond them, what else is going to have to happen for this group to finally have some success in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs roster, and the composition of the roster has changed over the last number of years. I don't think it's more formidable or less formidable than other years. I think what Bruce talked about is a commitment to playing a style of hockey and a formula that we know gives you playoff success. And that's being able to be in the hard areas. The playoffs are about who can go the hardest the longest, who's going to commit to being in a game where it's even. And we're not going to give up anything. That's the defensive part of things. And the Toronto Maple Leafs have shown that when they play that way, they can be very successful. But it's a commitment to doing it over the long haul. And I love what Bruce just said. He talked about bounce back. And the playoffs are about bouncing back. You're not going to win every game, or it becomes really difficult to win every game. So when you do lose, how are you able to bounce back? How are you able to bounce back after a bad period? When you're committed to a style of game that the playoffs dictate you have to be committed to, that's where the Leafs have to find themselves. And their first-round opponent is going to force them to have to play that way, or they're not going to win.
Yeah, Bruce, if you were behind the Leafs bench right now, would you be comfortable with the top 6 defensemen that they're going to go into the playoffs with?
Yeah, I would actually, and the reason is I've looked around the league, and the teams that win have big, solid defensemen, and they don't have necessarily 4 guys that are the most offensive guys, but if you take Vegas's last year, they had Shea Theodore, Peter Angelo. The Leafs can throw in the offense, but they got big guys that can defend the front of the net. And if they can do that, they're going to find ways to score. I'm not worried about, look at the Leafs have been a top 10 defensive team all year. And I think they can step it up. I look at last night's game on a team like Washington that's been scoring goals in boatloads lately. But I mean, they had the one goal, which was a mistake in the defensive zone. But other than that, they didn't have an awful lot of 10 bell. They didn't need 10 bell saves. They didn't have grade A chances, and that's what the Leafs are doing right now. And I think their experience. You might think they're a little old in some of the guys. I think that's going to be a real help come playoff time this year.
I'll tell you what else. The Leafs have got a nice schedule down the stretch. They have 10 games left. They get the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning 2 more times each, and then after that, every other game is a game against a team that's not currently in a playoff spot.